And we start with breaking news. The evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Sudan. U.S. forces staged an operation overnight to get embassy staff to safety.
Senior administration officials pointing to the rapidly deteriorating situation in recent days. But for right now, for safety reasons, there are no plans to offer similar assistance to the estimated 16,000 U.S. citizens who are still in the country.
The president saying overnight he is working with allies and partners to assist those Americans to the extent possible. And we are now learning exactly how the embassy evacuation mission was carried out. So let's go to ABC's James Longman, who's watching those developments from London. James, good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning, Gio. U.S. Special Operations Forces have undertaken a daring mission to get U.S. Embassy personnel out of Sudan. 3 Chinook helicopters took off from Djibouti. They flew 800 miles to Khartoum. They rescued dozens of people, and now other countries are racing to do the same. This morning, personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum are safely out of the country, rescued in an overnight mission by U.S. Special Operations Forces. The Pentagon called the operation fast and clean, saying 3 Chinook helicopters flew from a U.S. base in Djibouti more than 800 miles through the pitch-black darkness. On the ground for less than an hour, they saved dozens of people, including Americans from the embassy and other nationals, before making the 800-mile trip back. President Biden praising the unmatched skill of the 100 or so Special Operations Forces members involved. This as leaders across the world scramble to pull their nationals out of Sudan, a shaky ceasefire giving only a small window of opportunity.
Pulling U.S. citizens out of a war zone is always a challenge. In the case of Sudan, it's particularly hard because Sudan is so far inland. Now that the airfield has been closed, the airspace has been closed.
Saudi Arabia saying they've evacuated their first group of foreign nationals. Evacuees seen disembarking from a Saudi ship Saturday. The Saudi Foreign Ministry claiming they were able to evacuate 157 people from 12 countries. The fighting between the two warring military groups has only escalated as it enters its second week. Gunfire heard in Khartoum during a 72-hour ceasefire announced by both sides Friday to observe the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr. The Sudanese armed forces saying the rapid support forces breached the truce before it started. Therefore, there is no truce. The conflict has already claimed at least 400 lives, including 1 American. With the embassy closed, thousands more are stranded there.
All she wants is to be brought home now.
Massachusetts mum Trillian Clifford and her 18-month-old daughter are both trapped in Sudan. Clifford working abroad as a teacher.
They're just told, sit tight, wait it out. How do you wait out a war?
And that's the focus right now, figuring out how to get other U.S. citizens out of Sudan. One option is to use Port Sudan, that's over on the Red Sea, but that is some 500 miles away from Khartoum. It's too dangerous right now to leave your home, let alone the city. And it is worth repeating, some 16,000 Americans are still stranded in Sudan. Whit?
Yeah, complicated and extremely dangerous. James, thank you for the latest on what the Biden administration is trying to do for those Americans still in Sudan. Let's go to ABC's Elizabeth Schulze at the White House with more. Elizabeth, good morning.
Good morning, Whit. President Biden says he is receiving regular updates from his team on their efforts to help Americans who are still in Sudan. But the administration is making very clear that there is no large-scale evacuation plan in the works to help those thousands of people who are still there. The State Department says that it is in close contact with American residents in Sudan's capital as the situation on the ground deteriorates. The White House said this week that it is not standard practice to evacuate U.S. citizens living abroad. In a statement, President Biden thanked U.S. Embassy staff in Sudan, as well as those service members who brought them to safety in the overnight operation. He also singled out Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Saudi Arabia, who he says were critical to the success of the mission. But of course, any evacuation effort from this White House will be under intense scrutiny after the botched 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan. Whit.
Elizabeth, thank you. Let's bring in our Chief Global Affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz, who will be hosting This Week later on this morning. Martha, good morning to you. Always great to have you. So evacuations like this always come with considerable risk. We know that. But Pentagon officials say the situation in Sudan was quickly deteriorating. What more are you learning about the decision to launch this operation?
Well, they had been planning this for several days, and they wanted to take the first opportunity possible when they thought it was the safest to move those helicopters in and move those Americans out of there. Because as we've been saying, the situation is deteriorating by the day. Fortunately, the U.S. Embassy is on the outskirts of Khartoum, so those helicopters were able to land in a makeshift landing zone and safely take those Americans out of there. But these are always dangerous. Elizabeth mentioned Afghanistan. This isn't Kabul. Khartoum isn't Kabul. It is a very different situation. And Americans weren't being targeted. In fact, the warring sides probably are happy the Americans are out of there, but there's always the possibility of some sort of mistake, mistaking those helicopters for what they consider their opponent.
Yeah, different situation from Afghanistan. But Martha, we noted the 16,000 Americans still living in Sudan. The Pentagon says a larger scale evacuation just not on the table at the moment, but indicating they could assist in other ways.
And that's going to be tough. You're talking about 16,000 people. Many of those people are dual nationals. And we should add that all of them were warned to leave Sudan, and people were warned not to travel to Sudan in the last few weeks. It is going to be difficult if they choose to leave and they choose to go overland, as James pointed out, because it is very, very dangerous. Now, even getting in touch with the State Department is going to be difficult. Handling 16,000 calls, even 5,000 calls, especially when you don't have a diplomatic presence on the ground.
Significant challenges remain. Martha, thank you so much. We always appreciate it. And tune in to This Week later on this morning. Martha also has exclusive interviews with Senator Mark Warner and Representative Nancy Mace on the Supreme Court's order temporarily preserving access to a widely used abortion pill.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.